For 5 years, Sarah and I had been a constant. We were solid, the kind of couple everyone assumes will make it. But just weeks before we were supposed to get married, that foundation cracked, and she was unfaithful. The person she cheated with was a college student, a young man whose handsome face and sharp features were a startling echo of how I looked in my own university days. Later, her best friend asked her what it was like. Sarah took a moment, seeming to relive the memory, before she answered. "So much more intense than Liam," she said with a sigh. "If I had known other guys could be that much fun, I never would have tied myself down to just one. It feels like such a waste of those 5 years." I took in this new reality with a strange sense of calm. Then, I reached out to the young man in private. On the day of our wedding, he was the one who wore the tuxedo. He was the one who walked onto the stage that was meant for me. The moment Sarah turned and saw him, her composure shattered completely. Once we had settled on a wedding date, both Sarah and I were thrown into a flurry of activity. I was handling the logistics of the wedding itself, while she was focused on clearing her workload so we could have a full 2 weeks for our honeymoon. One afternoon, I had narrowed down the venue designs to 2 options and went to her office building to get her input. Before I could knock on her office door, I heard her voice from inside, laced with a dismissive tone. "Older men are just so dull, but someone like Ethan, he's perfect." I froze, a knot forming in my stomach as I realized the older man she was talking about was probably me. I found a small crack in the doorframe and listened, the grim picture becoming clearer with every word. "You know, I've been loyal to Liam for 5 whole years," she continued. "And now, even with the wedding so close, he won't lay a finger on me. I'm really starting to second-guess my decision to marry him." Her best friend chuckled, her voice low and suggestive. "So, if you find older guys so boring, what's your new, younger boyfriend like?" Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly as she considered the question, tapping a pen against her desk. "He's intense. He has so much more energy than Liam. If I'd known what else was out there," she sighed, "I never would have put all my eggs in one basket. It's a shame I wasted those 5 years." Through the gap in the door, I could see a complex mix of frustration and longing in her eyes. A stark departure from the composed, self-controlled woman I knew. In that moment, she was like a placid lake, and it was clear that a single stone tossed into her life had created ripples that were spreading everywhere. My hands tightened into fists, my heart feeling heavier with each passing second. Just as I gathered the nerve to push the door open and confront her, the stone himself appeared. Ethan walked out of Sarah's private lounge, dressed in a simple white shirt and casual pants, looking sleepy as if he'd just woken from a nap. As I looked at him, I had to admit the resemblance to my college-aged self was uncanny. "Sarah, are you two still discussing the project?" the young man asked, his voice bright and clear. Sarah didn't answer with words, but her gaze was fixed on him, almost clinging to him. "I need to get back from my class. If I bomb my finals, I might not be able to graduate." "All right, I'll have the driver take you," Sarah said, wrapping an arm around his waist and giving him a casual kiss on the cheek. "Your friend is still here," Ethan mumbled, looking a bit shy, but their bodies were pressed closely together. I'd read somewhere that that kind of physical proximity, hips and legs aligned, was a clear indicator of intimacy. Adding to that were their lingering looks, the way their hands seemed reluctant to separate, and how he kept glancing back as he walked away. It was a sweet scene, or it would have been if I wasn't Sarah's fiancé. When Ethan came out of her office, I was sitting at her assistant's desk. He looked at me with a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Didn't Sarah say no one was allowed up here without her approval?" he asked. I smiled calmly. "The driver is busy with an errand. Miss Chen asked me to give you a lift back to campus. He visibly relaxed and followed me to the parking garage. Wow, you're just an assistant and you drive a car like this? The kid was clearly sheltered. It was a Mercedes, yes, but it was a base model that probably cost around $50,000. I decided not to correct him. Miss Chen is a generous boss, I said. If you stick with her long enough, the perks are quite good. Have you been with Sarah for a long time? He asked. About 5 or 6 years. We were classmates in college. She thought I was competent, so she asked me to stay and work with her. I watched his curious expression in the rearview mirror. A moment later, just as I predicted, he leaned forward with a more personal question. Then you must have met her husband, right? I replied coolly. Miss Chen doesn't have a husband. That man is at most a fiancé. A small, triumphant smile played on the boy's lips. So what's her fiancé like? He pressed. In what way? Age, education, family, career? He's 28, has a bachelor's degree, raised by a single parent, works as a university professor. Sounds pretty ordinary, Ethan scoffed. And he's almost 30. His energy level probably isn't what it used to be, right? How can he possibly support Sarah's career and help raise a family? My grip on the steering wheel tightened. I never thought I'd hear such a pragmatic assessment from a college student. So much for higher education teaching depth. After a brief silence, I added, he probably won't be in Miss Chen's life for much longer. Ethan's mouth fell open slightly. Why? Because of you, I said plainly. Knowing Miss Chen, she likes you enough that she might just call off the wedding. Really? Could you keep an eye on things for me? Of course, I said. As Ethan got out of the car, he made a point of taking off his jacket. It was only then that I saw the dark hickeys covering his neck. My gaze must have been too direct because he looked flustered and quickly pulled his jacket back on. Stop staring. It's embarrassing. I looked away and asked softly, Does it hurt? He looked down, aggrieved. It hurts a lot. She's always so rough, but I don't have the courage to tell her to stop. Next time Miss Chen is like that, I advised, just tell her you're not comfortable. She won't force you. How do you know so much? He asked. I leaned closer to his ear and smiled. Her fiancé mentioned it when we were all gossiping. Ethan covered his mouth and giggled. You're so nice. I'll have to try that at home next time. At home? After dropping him off, I sent Sarah a text telling her I wouldn't be home for dinner. Then I switched to my Bentley and drove directly to the apartment Sarah and I had purchased to be our marital home. I needed to see if the home Ethan referred to was this one. Sarah had finished decorating the apartment a year ago, but had adamantly refused to give me the keypad code, insisting she wanted it to be a surprise for our wedding night. 061397, my birthday. Beep, incorrect password. 083195, Sarah's birthday. Beep, incorrect password. 022520, our anniversary. Beep, incorrect password. For my final attempt, I entered the birthday I had just learned from Ethan. 111305. Beep. The door is now open. Even though I had anticipated this outcome, the confirmation of it was a sharp, physical pain that made it difficult to breathe. I walked inside on unsteady legs and stumbled, catching myself on the entryway cabinet. 2 pairs of slippers were neatly placed on the floor beside it. It was clear they came here frequently. I wandered through the apartment like a ghost. His and hers toothbrushes, matching pajamas, sex toys laid out openly. It was all here, arranged in a scene of cozy, romantic domesticity. When I reached the master bedroom, I discovered a large mirror installed on the ceiling. I remembered watching a foreign romantic film with Sarah once where the main character's bedroom had a similar feature. At the time, she had leaned her head on my shoulder, her breath warm against my ear as she begged me to try it with her one day. "Wouldn't it be exciting to watch ourselves in the mirror while we do it?" she had whispered. I've always been more reserved about things like that. But since we were getting married, I thought it could be a way to add some novelty to our life. I had actually agreed to it. I just never imagined she would remember and then set it up as a surprise for someone else. The mirror above me reflected the shattered look in my eyes. It was a strange sensation. The weather outside was crisp and clear, a perfect autumn day, but the air in this room felt humid and heavy. I could even detect a faint, salty, musky scent lingering in the air. I felt a wave of nausea. My mind was screaming at me to leave, to get out of that place immediately. But just then, I heard the front door open. The sound of heavy panting echoed through the apartment. In a rush of panic, I ducked into the small study connected to the master bedroom. It was sparsely furnished, just a desk and a chair. I knew Sarah, driven by her current desires, wouldn't bother coming in here. "Sarah, isn't this a bit too often for one day?" "Don't talk." Ethan immediately went quiet, even his moans sounding muffled and suppressed. It only took a few moments before he cried out, "I'm sorry, Sarah. It hurts too much." She didn't stop. She just kept going. 1 minute, 2 minutes. My stomach churned more violently, and my head began to spin. I bit down hard on my own arm, partly to keep myself from passing out, and partly to punish myself for my own cowardice. I couldn't understand what had possessed me to hide in here. I should have confronted them the moment they walked in, delivered a slap to each of them to release my anger. But that felt too simple, too easy for them. Or perhaps it was my lingering feelings for Sarah that made me afraid to face her betrayal head-on. After all, because of my insistence on waiting until marriage, she had willingly stayed celibate for me for 5 long years. Amid the sounds of their bodies colliding, I heard Sarah hiss, "Who told you to bite me?" "Sarah, I don't feel good. Can't you be a little more gentle?" Ethan's voice was soft and pleading. Anyone hearing it would have felt their heart soften. Sarah was no different. She paused for a moment, then said gently, "Whatever you say." That familiar voice, that familiar tone. It had been a very long time since Sarah had spoken to me like that. I vaguely recalled the last time was about 6 months ago. Someone had slipped something into her drink at a business dinner. To prevent herself from losing control, she had called me to her hotel room and asked me to stay with her. She sat in a bathtub filled with cold water, her body shivering, but her face was flushed an unnatural red. I went to the minibar to get her a glass of water, and when I turned back, she was lunging at me like a wild animal. I knew she wasn't herself, but I was unwilling to break my own rule. In the struggle that followed, I bit down on her collarbone. A drop of blood mixed with the water on her skin and dripped onto the white carpet. Sarah's eyes were bloodshot, her pupils constricted. "I'm sorry, Liam. I wasn't thinking clearly." I straightened my shirt and pushed her back into the tub. Seeing my silence, she apologized over and over. "I'm sorry, Liam. I didn't mean it. Please don't be mad at me. I can't control myself." Like a stern parent, I reiterated my stance against premarital sex. Like a soaked puppy, she gently pulled on my sleeve and whispered those words. "I'll listen to you. I'll listen to whatever you say." The noises from the bedroom eventually stopped. I heard the front door open and close twice. A moment later, a message from Sarah lit up my phone. "Where are you? I miss you." Ethan also sent me an update. "Doing what you said really worked. The way Sarah looked at me was completely different." I typed back, "Is that so? It seems the rumor is true." "What rumor?" "That Miss Chen is planning to call off her wedding to marry you." I told Sarah I was at my dad's house, But when I arrived, she was already there, in the kitchen helping him prepare dinner. My dad gave me a pointed look, and I followed him into his bedroom. "Why did you lie to Sarah and tell her you were here? Do you have any idea how much I panicked when she showed up at the door looking for you? I thought you were the one cheating. If I hadn't been quick on my feet, you would have been caught. Now tell me, where were you?" "Catching a cheater?" I said flatly. "Whose?" My dad instinctively leaned in, ready for some juicy gossip. He had no idea the cheater I had caught was the daughter-in-law he adored. I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I asked, "Did you tell Mom about the wedding?" He waved his hand. "I'll let her know in a few days." "Don't bother." "What? I thought you wanted your mom to come to your wedding?" My fingers nervously twisted the hem of my shirt, unsure how to break the news about Sarah. After a long pause, I took out my phone and showed him a picture of Sarah and Ethan, their faces close together. "Dad, Sarah cheated on me. I just found out today." It took all my strength to keep my dad from storming out of the room. He was holding a pair of gardening shears, his eyes filled with a murderous rage. "Women are all the same, no good. She dares to cheat right before the wedding? Just you watch. I'm going to snip her to pieces." I managed to wrestle the scissors away from him and told him to calm down. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and started to cry. I knew he was remembering his own past. When my dad was in his prime, he went north to build his career and met a beautiful, wealthy socialite. They fell in love, and soon, she was pregnant with me. But after that, she changed completely. When my dad confronted her, she admitted the truth. She was already married, with children, to a man far more powerful than he was. All the promises she had made were lies. She laughed at my dad, calling him a fool for believing a woman's sweet talk. After I was born, she left me with him and disappeared, leaving him to raise me alone. Decades passed. My dad started his own business and became a successful tycoon. Meanwhile, the woman's family business fell into decline. To save it, she had to come back to the country to look for opportunities. I had planned to invite her to my wedding as a guest. I wanted her to see how well my dad and I were doing. Not only was my dad a millionaire, but I had become a professor at a top university before I was 30, and the woman I was marrying was even wealthier than her family had ever been. I wanted her to know that I held the power to save her company with a single word, but that I would deliberately never say it. Making her watch as I closed every door to her survival was meant to be my revenge. But now, that revenge had crumbled. I despised premarital sex because I wanted to protect myself from being the vulnerable one in a relationship. But in the end, just like my father, I had been deceived by a woman. When I got home that night, Sarah eagerly pushed me against the wall and kissed me deeply. It had been a long time since we had kissed like that, with such passion and sincerity. Was she trying to relive a memory, or was she overcome with guilt? All I felt was a profound sense of disgust. Sarah poured all of her emotion into that kiss, but I remained completely still, unresponsive. So this is what it feels like to fall out of love. In that single moment, the cheating, the relationship, the 5 years of my life, none of it seemed to matter anymore. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Leaving Sarah didn't seem like such a terrible thing after all. "What's wrong?" Sarah pulled back when she got no reaction from me. She buried her face in the curve of my neck, kissing me again and again, as if trying to devour me. I grabbed her by the collar and pulled her toward the bedroom. "You want this?" Sarah's eyes widened for a second, before a fire ignited within them. "Agree to 3 conditions, and I'll give you your reward ahead of schedule." "What conditions? Tell me. Maybe I'll eat you alive right now." Sarah straddled my legs, and just like that, our positions were reversed. "First, I want more than half of your assets." "Easy. I've already had the paperwork drawn up. It's a voluntary gift." As she spoke, her hand slid down to my stomach, caressing me. Second, I want a massive wedding. You have to invite everyone you can think of. Done. I'll even invite every employee from my company. We'll have 180 tables. How about that? She was growing impatient, urging me to state my final condition. Third, if we ever separate, we are not to bother each other again. The movement of Sarah's hand stopped. Our eyes met, and for a long moment we both hesitated. Then she rolled off me and sighed. Liam, don't ever say things like that again. We are never going to break up. With that, she straightened her clothes and went into the guest room. I had expected as much. Sarah saw herself as being deeply in love with me, and had once sworn she would never marry anyone else. A woman who built her identity around her devotion would likely never let me go easily. But it didn't matter. Once the property agreement was signed, I would have the leverage I needed. A few days later, Sarah's assistant delivered the prenuptial agreement. It was a thick bundle of papers. She had transferred almost all of her personal net worth into my name. After signing, I asked the assistant how Sarah had been lately. She hadn't come home since that night. The assistant told me she had been cooped up in her office, occasionally losing her temper in meetings and making the entire company nervous. I told the assistant to remind Sarah to get proper rest, to watch what she ate, and to avoid cold foods. The assistant nodded eagerly. Your concern will definitely make Miss Chen feel better. I tapped my fingers on the table as I sent a message to Ethan. Ethan, Miss Chen and her fiancé had an argument. She probably really wants to see you right now. As I anticipated, Ethan went to find Sarah. He began posting several times a day on his social media, showing off their time together. He accompanied her to work. She waited for him after his classes, and at night, they slept together. When I saw a suggestive selfie Ethan posted of himself lying in bed in front of the mirrored ceiling, I nearly spit out my drink. Meanwhile, I was living the life of a single man. But one day, an unwelcome visitor showed up during one of my university lectures. Surprised? Ethan had shed his timid, obedient facade. The young man sitting across from me was the picture of arrogance. Sarah still had feelings for you, so I didn't want to make things difficult. I went along with your little game, but things have changed. You've exhausted her patience. If you don't want to lose too badly, you should just walk away. This was the first time we had spoken in person since that car ride, and the first time I got a clear look at his true, shallow nature. You're too eager, I said slowly. You could have just played dumb and waited for me to hand Sarah over to you, but you had to come here and cause a scene. Isn't that like biting the hand that feeds you? Ethan looked furious. He clenched his jaw, his chest rising and falling. Sarah would be mine, with or without you. Is that so? Well, let's see if she goes to your place tonight. As I spoke, I sent a text to Sarah. Not to be outdone, Ethan also sent a message to Sarah, affectionately asking her to dinner. A few minutes later, I received a very satisfactory reply. Ethan's face, however, turned pale. I'm the only one who can help you get Sarah, I said. Your best option right now is to wait for me to step aside. Then you can smoothly take my place. Ethan studied my face, and after seeing that I was serious, his tone softened. But will you really leave? Yes? When? In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it was the wedding. Ethan left with a smile, believing that in just 2 weeks his life was about to change forever. After he left, I threw away the cup he had been drinking from. I had to suppress my anger and pretend to be generous while helping him plan his future. If I didn't want to publicly humiliate both of them, I never would have wasted my time on him. Someone who knowingly becomes a homewrecker deserves nothing good. After Ethan left, I called a friend who worked at his university. In a short conversation, I learned that Ethan's grades had dropped significantly over the past 6 months. The only institution currently willing to offer him a scholarship was a private foundation named Odyssey. I smiled. That foundation belonged to my dad. It was such a perfect coincidence. In that moment, it felt like fate itself was on my side. That evening, Sarah came home as I knew she would, but this time she seemed a little distant. I was the one who broke the silence, giving her updates on the wedding preparations. The invitations have all been sent, the venue is decorated, and my tuxedo and your gown are both ready. My enthusiasm seemed to be contagious, and her mood began to improve. I found myself wondering what her expression would be when she saw Ethan standing at the center of the stage. Sarah was always very concerned with her public image. She might just try to make the best of it to save face. That would be fine too, if she acknowledged Ethan as the groom. Then the family and friends in attendance would have no reason to object. The thought was so absurd that I laughed out loud. Seeing me smile, Sarah hugged me from behind. "Darling, you've become so well-behaved," she whispered. "You used to always make me be the one to give in after we argued. Now you're the one making the first move." I thought about it, and she was right. When Sarah and I first started our relationship, we were both at an age where marriage was a consideration. But I wasn't ready to settle down just yet. I was determined to get my doctorate overseas. Sarah threw a tantrum for days, and all my attempts to reason with her failed. On the day I was scheduled to leave, she showed up at the airport, her eyes red, cursing me for being heartless. Of the 5 years we were together, I spent more than half of them abroad. Sarah would fly to visit me whenever she had free time. Just thinking about it now seems exhausting. I had tried to convince her to break up with me and find someone better suited for her, but that only made her furious, and she accused me of trying to push her away. The main reason I decided to come back home from my job was because I didn't want her to have to endure those grueling trips anymore. She had compromised so much for me over those 5 years. I felt I owed it to her to give something back. I was learning to love her in the way she loved me. But unfortunately, she was not being as faithful to me as I was trying to be to her. With 3 days left until the wedding, Sarah wrapped up her work and stayed home to be with me. I found her constant presence suffocating and contacted Ethan directly, telling him to find a way to get her out of the house. Ethan used every excuse he could think of and successfully kept her busy for 2 days. During that time, he was like a high school student waiting for college acceptance letters, anxious and on edge. He would send me photos of them in bed to show off, while at the same time humbly asking me to confirm, again and again, that I would really leave. I forwarded all of those photos to our wedding planner, instructing her to make sure they were displayed on the wedding day. One day before the wedding, Ethan came to me in tears. He said Sarah had given him a large sum of money and told him to leave. She had given him 2 million yuan, which would have been a life-changing amount for him before, but because of my promises, he was no longer content with just money. He nervously asked me what he should do. I gave him the address of the hotel and told him to be there on time for the wedding. On the morning of the wedding, I asked Ethan if he dared to marry Sarah himself. He didn't hesitate for a second and immediately agreed. And so, within half an hour, the groom was changed from Liam to Ethan. When Ethan walked out of the dressing room in a full tuxedo, with his hair and makeup done, even I was taken aback for a moment. The resemblance to me was striking. If no one pointed it out, the guests would probably assume the man on the stage was me. Ethan was completely caught up in the fantasy of marrying Sarah, giddy with excitement. He seemed to have forgotten that many of the people in the audience were his own classmates from university. I had invited them personally. Students love drama. They spread information quickly, have a strong sense of justice, and had all received funding from my dad's foundation. With their help, the public humiliation of Sarah and Ethan was sure to be even more spectacular. Led by the wedding coordinator, Ethan waited outside the main doors of the venue. Inside, soft, beautiful music began to play, and the MC's voice filled the hall. And now, Let us please welcome the groom. Ethan's perspective. I had never seen such a high-end tuxedo in my life. But the first time I saw it, it was already mine. Waiting by the door for those few minutes, I wasn't nervous at all. In their most passionate moments, Sarah had sworn she would love me forever. Now that she was finally free from that old man, she would surely be overjoyed to see me. The doors slowly swung open. A warm spotlight fell on me. The stage was decorated with thousands of expensive flowers, and the air was filled with screams and cheers. He looked so much like the groom, I almost didn't recognize him. The people in the crowd were muttering something strange. I am the groom. Why would I need to look like anyone else? I composed myself and began to walk down the aisle that was meant for me. Once I reached the end of this path, I would be living a life where I could have anything I wanted. 1 step, 2 steps. I slowly made my way toward my Sarah, but before I could even reach her side, she suddenly turned around. She was definitely surprised. She was just staring at me, stunned. I reached out to take her arm, but suddenly an old man and woman appeared out of nowhere. The man started shoving me, and the woman slapped Sarah hard across the face. I screamed for Sarah to help me, but why wasn't she doing anything? Everything slowly came into focus. The cheers weren't cheers. They were my classmates in the audience, booing me. They were shouting, exposing my identity, calling me a homewrecker. I looked at Sarah and finally understood her expression. It wasn't surprise at all. Her eyes were filled with pure terror. She took the slap, then slapped herself several more times, not stopping until her lip was bleeding. Then she lunged at me like a madwoman, demanding to know where her husband was. Ha ha ha, she called him her husband. They weren't even married. What kind of husband was he? Besides, from the very first time I met Liam, he never once got angry with me for being with his fiancée. The husband she was screaming for didn't love her at all. Looking at the frantic look on Sarah's face, a fire of hatred ignited inside me. I spat in her face and said, "He dumped you! You mean less than nothing to him?" My tuxedo was torn to shreds by a few old men. The flowers were kicked and trampled by Sarah. We fought in front of 1,000 people, but their eyes were all glued to the large screens on either side of the stage. That bastard Liam. He had actually put our private photos on public display. How could he be a professor? How could he even call himself a decent human being? The people in the crowd started pointing and whispering at me. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could feel their disgust. But I was the victim here. Why was everyone cheering for him? Why? Why? Liam's perspective. On a flight back from a visiting scholar program in Copenhagen, I ran into Sarah. It had been 6 months. The once vibrant, glamorous woman was now just a shadow of her former self. She sat in the row behind me, silent for the entire flight. It wasn't until we landed that she suddenly grabbed my suitcase and said she wanted to take me somewhere. I never would have imagined that the place she was taking me to was a prison. The once handsome young Ethan had lost all of his shine. When he saw me through the glass partition, he knelt on the floor and begged for my forgiveness. Sarah never cheated. It was me. I was the one who seduced her. I faked those photos. I made up all those stories. Please, I'm begging you, talk to Sarah for me. Give me a chance to start over. He became hysterical and was quickly dragged away by the guards. Looking at the flicker of hope in Sarah's eyes, I felt a fresh wave of irritation. You brought me here just to tell me this? Liam, I was a victim too, she said. Her voice so pitiful it sounded like she had suffered some terrible injustice. Around the time we were supposed to get married, he was always threatening to kill himself to get me to see him. I didn't want any trouble, so I just went along with it. But I never imagined he was doing so many things behind my back. Believe me, I never betrayed you. Not physically, and definitely not emotionally. Liam, please come back. Don't leave me again. The sky outside suddenly grew dark as the last ray of sunlight disappeared behind the clouds. It felt just like the last shred of feeling I had for Sarah, finally extinguished by her own words. I took her somewhere too, to our former apartment, the same place Ethan had called home. "Do you dare to go inside?" I asked. Sarah was calm. She walked up to the door and entered the code. 061397. My birthday. Liam, I could never bring myself to come back here. Every time I thought about it, all I could picture was the beautiful future we were supposed to have. But then. Sarah trailed off as she saw me pull a miniature camera from the bedside table in the master bedroom. I came here 6 months ago. Back then, the password was Ethan's birthday. There were 2 pairs of matching slippers by the door. The mirror on the ceiling reflected your bodies tangled together. In the heat of the moment, Ethan would bite your collarbone and whisper for you to be gentle. "Stop it!" The day before the wedding, you and Ethan tried some difficult positions, and then you gave him a sum of money and told him to leave. "Liam, stop it!" Sarah clutched her head, sinking to her knees in front of me, overcome with agony. You can't even stand to hear it. But 2 weeks before the wedding, I was right here, in the study, listening to how much you were enjoying yourself, Sarah. You were the one who gave him that $200,000, and now you're pinning all the blame on him. You did all of it, yet you pretend to be the pitiful victim who did nothing wrong. Aren't you disgusting? As I walked out the door, I could hear Sarah's desperate sobs from inside the apartment. I thought that was the end of it, that we had finally drawn a clear line between us. But I never expected that just 1 day later, her assistant would call me. "Mr. G, you need to get to the hospital, quickly. Something's happened to Miss Chen." "Is she dead?" I could hear the beeping of medical equipment over the phone. I couldn't help but feel a morbid curiosity about what had happened. When I arrived at the hospital, the hallway outside her room was crowded with people. My former in-laws were there. They looked like they had aged 10 years. The dignified elegance they had 6 months ago was gone. Seeing them, I still respectfully called them Sir and Ma'am. They had always been kind to me, and at the wedding they hadn't hesitated to discipline both Sarah and Ethan. "My dear boy, you're finally here. We're at our wits' end, please. I'm begging you, save our daughter." "Ma'am, you should be asking a doctor to save her. I only came today because there's one last piece of business I need to handle with Sarah." Fine, anything, as long as you're willing to see her." Without another word, they pushed me into the hospital room. Sarah was lying flat on the bed, her eyes closed. Her face was completely pale, making her look incredibly fragile. I glanced at the chart at the foot of the bed. Suicide attempt by overdose of sleeping pills. So she really had almost died. I sat by her bed, quietly waiting for her to wake up. At some point, her phone screen lit up. Her lock screen was a photo of me during a cold winter in Copenhagen, bundled up in a puffy black jacket, hopping out of a car and shuffling toward a convenience store. The photo captured a mundane moment from my daily routine during my visiting scholar program, and Sarah's phone had over 100 similar photos. "I can't live without seeing you." Sarah had woken up at some point. Her voice was so hoarse it was almost unrecognizable, likely a side effect of the pills. "I knew you didn't want me to bother you, so I rented an apartment across the street from yours. I would wait by the window every day before you woke up, watching you crunch through the snow, get hit on by women, or chat with the shopkeeper." The pain I felt was indescribable. When I saw you weren't eating, I couldn't eat either. When I saw you losing weight, I forced myself to get thinner too, as if that was the only way I could feel like I was by your side. Liam, I was with you for that entire 6 months. Ethan going to prison wasn't some trick I pulled. It was because he stabbed my father with a knife on the wedding day and then assaulted a police officer. He got what he deserved. I took you to see him because he was the one who seduced me, and I wanted a chance to explain myself to you." Sarah's pale, cold hand suddenly rested on my wrist. The sensation was as horrifying as if a corpse had suddenly sat up in front of me. Her story was certainly moving, but I wasn't about to let that dead, rotten love be resurrected. I snatched my hand away and stood up abruptly. "I'm still begging you not to die, and if you're going to, don't say it's because of me. You have so many excuses and reasons, but you can't deny that you were the one in bed with Ethan. Older men are boring. He's so much more energetic than Liam. You might be able to conveniently forget those words, but I can't. Sarah, stop acting like you're so deeply in love with me. You were the one who betrayed our relationship first, and now you're playing the victim in front of everyone. What position does that put me in? If you actually died, would you want everyone to condemn me for being heartless? For me to kill myself, too, to join you?" She wasn't the only one who invested 5 years in this relationship. I did, too. During those years, I spent studying abroad. I cried myself to sleep from loneliness more times than I can count. The only times I could get a good night's sleep were when Sarah was there with me. I loved her more than anything. I couldn't even imagine what my life would be like without her. But she was the one who complained I was getting old. She was the one who brought another man into our home. And now she was standing in front of me, playing the innocent, devoted victim, making a scene about life and death. It was unbearably annoying. "Sarah, we really don't have a future. Nothing you do has anything to do with me anymore." As I walked out of the room, a group of worried faces turned to look at me. I walked up to Sarah's mother and handed her the property documents Sarah had gifted me 6 months ago. "Sarah won't take these back, so I'll have to ask you to sign for them." As Sarah's mother hesitantly took the documents, a thud came from inside the room. An insulated tumbler slowly rolled out onto the floor. Sarah was leaning against the doorframe, her voice weak. "Don't take them. It's what I owe him." I closed my eyes, placed the stack of documents on the nearby table, and walked away without looking back. Sarah's perspective. A year after we broke up, Liam got into extreme sports. After a skydive, he told his instructor, "That was amazing. The adrenaline rush is enough to get me through another 6 months of teaching." Was something bothering him? Should I try to help him? I thought about it, but decided against it. Liam has always been independent, strong, and brave. He's never faced any real trouble in his life. My appearance was his biggest trouble. When he went bungee jumping, I secretly followed him again. Standing on the other side of the canyon, watching him climb onto the platform, my heart started pounding uncontrollably. The things he was doing were getting more and more dangerous. He had no one looking out for him. What if there was an accident? I told my assistant to hurry over and arrange for a female instructor to accompany him. That way he would have fun and be safe. Before I could even finish my sentence, I saw a woman behind him through my binoculars. That woman had her hands on his waist, and my Liam. He was smiling at her. In that moment, it felt like someone had their hands wrapped around my throat. It was too much. It was just too painful. Is this what Liam felt when he caught me with Ethan? Panic, anxiety, agony. I even started to feel the urge to die again. I couldn't watch anymore and threw the binoculars to the ground. She just put a hand on his waist. She's probably just the instructor. But in the next second, a woman's shout echoed across the canyon. I couldn't avoid it. I heard her say, "Liam, I love you. Will you marry me?" "Yes, I'll marry you." That was Liam's reply. After a year, he had accepted someone else's proposal. Breathing became harder and harder, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my chest. I wanted to struggle, but I only grew more frantic. I stood up, but I didn't know where to go. After pacing in circles, I finally spotted where Liam was, I have to go to Liam. Wherever he is, that's the way forward. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. My foot suddenly found empty air, and I began to fall. I realized then that a chasm had long since opened up between Liam and me. No matter how far I walked, I could never reach him again.